Hello, friends. Your buddy Stub here at Passyunk Avenue in Battersea, London. Welcome to the One Bourbon, One Chard, One Beer podcast. Little Tweener. For Friday, June 26, 2026. Friends, as always, let's remind you that the One Bourbon, One Chard, One Beer podcast may contain foul language or explicit content, so listener and viewer discretion is advised. Hey, if you're at work, put on your headphones. If you have a child in the car, listen to this shit later. And if you're any of our mothers, remind your friends over coffee that you raised us way fucking better. Please also let me remind you that you can watch the One Bourbon, One Chard, One Beer podcast on the Corkivy YouTube channel under the One Bourbon, One Chard, One Beer podcast playlist. So go ahead and do that so you can see my smiling face as well as hear my dulcet tones. And please to also follow my best good mate and co-founder of the One Bourbon, One Chard, or One Beer podcast, Kern at Forgotten Grapes or at Paso Seco. And you can follow me at Corkivy to keep up with my ever-expanding shenanigans. Now, friends, I'm going to do a bit of housekeeping about the podcast towards the end of the episode, but for now, let's just get to the show, shall we? And I'd like to start today by chatting about the latest, I'll say, official live show I attended. Well, at least the one that I wasn't hosting or running sound here at Passyunk Avenue for. So, on our trip to the U.S. back in May, the Rib and I began by heading directly from the airport to Hollywood Casino in Charlestown, West Virginia, for the sole purpose of seeing my favorite Texas artist, Robert Earl Keen. Now, this was the whatever number of times I've actually seen REK live now, and I have to say, friends, it was quite a bit different show than usual. So, first, though, let's talk about the venue, which I'd never been to personally, at least for a show before. It's a smallish theater-style setup that can accommodate 12 to 1,500 or so people. And now, being that this show was on the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend in the U.S., the venue itself was far from full, but I expect there were about 600 people there, most of whom were, shall we say, a bit more experienced in life than the Rib or me. But friends, it was REK, and we were all in on starting our visit across the pond with some great live music. Now, opening for the Texas legend that evening was California native Sam Stoane. Sam played a 40-ish minute acoustic set accompanied by her husband, Gareth Bell, on guitar and backing vocals. Now, friends, I had never heard Sam Stoane before, I must say, but I was quite enamored with her. Her voice showcased her songwriting very well. I very much enjoyed her set. I enjoyed the set so much that I've spun her debut album, Tales of the Dark West, several times since, and have actually added a few of the tracks to my live event hosting playlist. Now, standout tracks for me personally were Coyote Cries, Diesel, When My Time Comes, and Stone's cover of the Rodney Crowell-penned Even Cowgirls Get the Blues, sung by many people. Maybe the most familiar was Emmylou Harris. Now, friends, if you like traditional Western music about Western things, give Tales of the Dark West a listen. You're sure to find a track you will enjoy. Now, let's get to Robert Earl Keen. So, for longtime listeners and people who know me personally, you know I absolutely heart REK. I've lost track of how many times I've seen him live over the years, and in fact, back in 2022, I planned my first visit back to the States after moving to London around being able to see REK on what was his then announced last tour. Well, apparently, friends, REK, dealt with and came across some health issues and is back on the road again. So the fact that his East Coast swing lined up with our planned trip seemed to be the universe's way of telling me to begin my visit with a live REK show. And the show did not disappoint, friends. As always, REK looked great and sounded as good as fucking ever. And he and the boys played a few deeper cuts that aren't generally, at least in my experience, in the set list for live touring shows. Now, that said, this was a bit of a different REK show than I've attended before. Now, Keen always tells a few stories and anecdotes during his show, but generally he just takes the stage and immediately begins singing. But on this night, however, REK came out, sat down on his stool, and began chatting. And I'm pretty sure he chatted for the better part of 20 minutes or so before actually starting the show itself. And throughout the show, he told stories and chatted a bit more than usual between songs. And there were some non sequiturs, not to the point of rambling, but more like someone who just had a lot to say and wanted to say it to all the fans in attendance. And while this was a bit of a different feel of an REK show for me, it was quite charming and intimate, I felt. And while I know a lot of people love to go to a show and see an artist and just want to hear their favorite songs exactly as they sounded on the record they listened to for years. I personally appreciated the band playing some classics in a bit of a different style this time. I also appreciated REK chatting a bit about musical influences and the fact that he confided that he came to appreciate Bob Dylan a bit later than his contemporaries, at least, before launching into an amazing fucking cover of Tangled Up in Blue, which happens to be the Ribs' favorite Dylan song. So friends, a Robert Earl Keen show was a great way to start our trip, but I must sadly report that the tenner I threw into the slots as we walked through the casino to the event center netted me exactly nothing, but hell, it was still a great evening. Now friends, as for a pairing with a Robert Earl Keen show, friends, you know I have to go with, come on, you know what it is, right friends? It's a shot of bourbon chased with a beer, right? Now, I also mentioned in the last episode that we were prepping to attend the Royal Ascot meeting, which we indeed did last week. Now, I've been asked by several mates what it's like to attend Royal Ascot in the Royal Enclosure and to be part of the car park picnics that transpire before and after each day of racing. Well, it's actually difficult to explain, but in short, Royal Ascot is the premier horse racing meet in the UK every year. It's 5 days of fancy dress, champagne, pims, amazing horse racing, hanging with mates and throwing around the banter, and of course, wagering. So let's address each one of those aspects of the week, shall we? First, the fancy dress. Now, gentlemen must wear a morning suit and top hat. The ladies must wear a dress of appropriate length, which is at or below the knee, with a minimum 1-inch strap on the shoulders and a hat, which technically is not supposed to be a fascinator in the Royal Enclosure, but sometimes they miss that. Easy enough, but I must say the ladies get the better end of this deal, as a summer dress and light hat are well cooler when temps rise than layers of a shirt, waistcoat, and jacket while wearing a fucking convection oven of a top hat required for the gentlemen. That's the dress code. However, appropriate, quote, national dress, end quote, is also allowed. And I'm not going to lie, friends, on the warmer days when I saw a couple of gents in kilts, I was a bit jealous, maybe to the point that Max Stub will actually make an appearance next year. Probably not, though. Number 2, champagne and pins. Yeah, mixed drinks and beer is also available, but one cannot go to Royal Ascot and not enjoy some bubbles and a pins, unless, of course, one doesn't indulge at all. Number 3, the horse racing. Friends, there are 7 races per day for the 5-day meet, which begins Tuesday and ends on the Saturday. That's 35 opportunities to cheer on your favorite and win big. And there are top horses, trainers, and jockeys from the world over participating. It's a proper race meet for those of us who love horse racing. Number 4, hanging with mates and throwing the banter. Now, friends, hanging with mates is easy, regardless of whether it's mates you intentionally attend or meet up with, or those, quote, once-a-year mates, end quote, you meet in the car park, the grandstand, or the hotel. Now, as for throwing banter, it's usually in the form of an ill-fitting waistcoat or one that pops a button, which I did this year, or more usually, around why you made a dodgy wager on a particular race. That especially applies when you tell your mate you're going to follow him in on a wager on the favorite ridden by a jockey you know, and then you didn't. And it really especially applies when that horse and jockey win big. Which brings me to number 5, friends, wagering. Now, I figure if I'm at the races, I might as well have a bet, right? So I think I wagered on all but 2 of the races throughout the week. Now, I had a few winners of a bit of significance, but overall, I returned home with a little less in the money clip than when I left. But in that vein, losing money sucks, but I plan for my wagering, have a daily limit set, and I figure if I win, that's great. But if I lose, I paid for the entertainment of screaming for the hope during a particular race. So I wager responsibly, albeit not always intelligently. So what's the takeaway from Royal Ascot here, friends? Going away for 5 days of racing in the heat in fancy dress takes a bit out of you, like both physically and socially. But it's become my favorite absolute fucking week of the year since moving to the UK. And despite the effort and how good it feels to arrive home late Saturday after a week at Ascot, It's the thing that we chat about every year in late January or early February, waiting for the winter to break, saying, quote, before you know it, Ascot will be here, end quote. Now, as for preparing for the week, friends, come on. I have to go with a glass of champagne now, don't I? So, the last, quote, topical thing I'd like to chat about this week is the World Cup. Now, the tournament is in full swing, with the group stages set to end on Sunday and the round of 32 knockout stage set to begin on Monday. And mates, I'm really, really enjoying being here in London for my second World Cup. The energy around football here is electric, regardless of which teams are playing. And staying up and out late for a big match is even more electric, as we all convene in the pubs or bars at 2 or 3 a.m. specifically to support the teams that are on the telly. Now, it's a unique experience being in a country that is not only mad for football, but also in the country where the modern version of the game originated. So I find myself supporting two teams this year, as one might expect. The U.S. team seems to be in well better form than anyone expected, will top Group D, and go on to round of 32, so that's a plus. And an even bigger plus in the U.S. bracket is a possible 15 opponents, only a handful of which will be expected to give the Stars and Stripes a formidable match. That said, we play each match for a reason, so anything can happen moving forward. Now on the England side, the Three Lions are currently in line to face either Cape Verde, Portugal, or Colombia in the round of 32. I'm guessing a matchup with the first time Cape Verde in the World Cup is the hope here. I mean, it is for me at least. Now, as far as a cheeky wager, I've backed both the U.S. and England to win the tournament, but logically, I'm actually not sure either team can make it past the quarterfinals, depending on the draw, of course. But as I said, all the matches are actually played for a reason, so who knows what the fuck can happen. The momentum of a tournament like the World Cup, not to mention the momentum of any given match, can turn on a well-played set piece, the perfectly placed ball in, or a lapse in defending. So, once again, anything can fucking happen. But I'll say this, friends, because I think I have to at this point. It's coming home. Now, what do we pair with near round-the-clock international football? Mates, it's pints. It's always fucking pints. And if you're supporting England, throwing your pint when the Three Lions score is optional and perhaps at the security discretion of the establishment in which you're watching the match. So let me ask you this, friends, as I take a sip. Who do you fancy to win the World Cup? Drop a comment and let us know. All right. I promised earlier a bit, and here it is. Let's get to a bit of housekeeping about the podcast itself. Friends, as you listen or watch today, you are part of the 250th episode of the One Bourbon, One Chard, One Beer podcast and the 120th Lil Tweener episode. That's a lot of fucking episodes, even if it took us just over 9 years to get here. Now, I know the show has changed a bit over the last 9 years. Hell, it's changed a couple of times, but Kurt and I have really had a great time doing the show. From the initial concept planning to recording our first episodes to keeping the show going following my move to London to transitioning a bit as Kern dove into starting up Paso Seco sparkling wines to me keeping some semblance of the show going by pairing beverages with daily music history facts on our socials to once again transitioning the format when we've had on special guests and me just doing little tweeners. We've enjoyed all of it. And despite Kern not being part of the live shows currently, we keep in touch and chat about the show and reminisce on how cool it's been shepherding the One Bourbon, One Chard, One Beer podcast through the many technical, physical, and just general life transitions. The point of the pod has always been to find the intersection of music, the beverage arts, and general culture as a way to bring people together and to hopefully lay some fun facts on you and maybe getting a laugh out of you on occasion. And I promise, friends, we will continue to endeavor to do all of those things and more. At least through the end of the summer. So, with that, friends, this is our last episode at 250. At least until the end of the summer again. Yeah, we're going to keep going. We're not quitting anything. And if we do quit something, we're doing it with a lot of fucking fanfare. So, here we are. but I'm taking a well-deserved break because of other projects and timing and scheduling with guests and the like, and honestly, the fact that I need a little time off personally here to revamp everything and get going once the summer is over. So with that, friends, I want to give a shout out to my mates here at Passyunk Avenue. Urge you to follow our Young Life podcast. You could do that on the YouTubes at Young Life or on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. I'd also like to remind you to follow Kern at Forgotten Grapes or at Paso Seco, where you can learn more about Paso Seco award-winning wine, the only sparkling wine made exclusively from Paso Seco grapes. And also continue to follow me on the socials at CorkMB. Friends, Kern and I really do appreciate your support over the years. We're happy to do this. Have a great fucking summer. And until next time, remember to be nice, be safe, and be happy. Cheers, mates.
I gotta go. I gotta go somewhere. I gotta go. Wasting time standing here. I gotta go.